Thank you all for joining us. I'd like to have Marty Feldman, our chairman, make some introductory remarks.
Thank you, Paul. Welcome to the April meeting of the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers here in New England. We are very pleased tonight to have Chad Davis with us. Chad is the Nebraska Public Media Labs and R&D person for Nebraska Public Media, and is working with generative AI for many uses, including game development. He also publishes the Media Innovators Weekly newsletter and is going to be covering the general topic tonight more in a philosophical way. Many of you may be wary of AI, and maybe you well should be in some cases. You never know where a new technology is going to lead, and usually new technologies end up being used for both good and bad. So we're going to hope for the better, but you're going to have a better idea of all of that when Chad gets going tonight. I want to thank Paul Beck, with whom we could not run this section, for all the work he's done on preparation of this. And before we turn this over to Chad, I want to mention that we are having another very important meeting this month on April 28th. It's an in-person meeting at WBZ TV in Boston. That's at 1170 Silversfield Road. I think most of you probably know where that is. Beginning with the social at 6:30 p.m. And that will be our annual NAB wrap-up. Should be very interesting. We've got an excellent panel put together. I'm personally really looking forward to it. Then on May 7th, we're having another generative AI meeting in cooperation with the New York section. Also on Zoom, you'll be getting more on that in your email. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Chad, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to say on this topic. Thank you, Chad.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Before I dive in, can I just do some of you, I can still see on the screen, just for those who have cameras on, show of hands, like if you've experimented at all with generative AI, images or chat bots. Yeah, okay. So most everybody. Okay. Just helps me like figure out how I want to tune my remarks. So well, let me get this then. There we go. Okay. So thanks for the introduction. And I'm going to shrink this down. So I'm just kind of looking at the little green light on my Mac. So yeah, I'm Chad. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Nebraska Public Media. I actually am coming to you today from outside Boulder, Colorado, because I live there now, even though I'm still working for Nebraska. The beauty of modern technology is I can pretty much do this job anywhere, and have over the years. I have just about me in terms of background, I have spent about 30 years in public media. The last 9 of those have been in Nebraska, so I'm on my 10th year here, which I never thought I'd be in Nebraska for that long. I have worked for 5 different public media stations in my career, and one of the people who has worked for all 4 types of FCC broadcast licenses. Some of them were those kind of weird public media hybrids, where it's like you're a school district and you're also a university licensee. But so I've got a couple of chimeras in my background, but that's one of my claims to fame. And for y'all on this particular Zoom, I was at GBH for a good chunk of my career, about 5 years, from late 97 until middle of 2002. So almost 5 years. So, and at that point in my life, I was really more focused on television. I was the TV programmer working on that duopoly. And so I know, like I said in the intro, before the intro, I know Boston pretty well because I lived first in Beverly, and then for most of my time I lived in Canton. So I had friends in Newton and things like that. So I started in TV, worked in TV for a good chunk of my career, and then sort of in the mid-aughts, I moved into interactive, and then in the teens, I kind of moved more into experimental type stuff, which kind of brings me into the world of AI. Just a little bit about where I work. Nebraska Public Media Labs is the R&D unit focused on next gen public media. We're one of the few stations that actually has an R&D unit. GBH kind of does it in a way that's spread out across a bunch of different departments, but we've got one that's directly reporting to the GM and is kind of focused on things that are not broadcast. So our big emphasis is audience agency, which I translate as interactivity and also accessibility. And our focus has been sort of content created using emerging media tools, and that definition has changed a lot over the last 10 years. For the most part, these days we're doing stuff with 3D modeling, game engines, and game design. We've published at least one. I'm trying to think. Yeah, one video game, mobile version's coming out. We got another game coming out this summer, and a couple of VR experiences along the way. And the other topic that we're really focused on right now is AI guidance. Let me see. Yes, Stacy Decker. I'm seeing John. Stacy Decker was at GBH. Well, so Stacy was actually at Nebraska. Then I believe he got the job at GBH from
That's right.
Nebraska.
Yep.
And then now he's back in Nebraska because he's now my
That's right.
boss. So anybody who knows Stacy, Stacy's my boss now.
All right, very good.
Yeah. And
Didn't mean
we're
to
happy.
interject there. Sorry.
No, it's fine. With the full screen on I see little things
Yeah,
pop
yeah.
up, so I was able, but it's all good. I'll throw the chat down in the corner, and people should feel free to use the chat. I'll keep an eye on it. So yeah, we're working kind of AI guidance, and then I think AI has kind of emerged as this sort of parallel thing that we're working on, but we really were kind of focused on the concept of lifelong play in games, as well as extended reality. So why do we do this? Why is Labs focused in this way? I think one of the things we're really thinking about in Labs is how do we maintain current operations while we embrace disruptive tech? I think that's part of the reason why this department was created. And how do we translate the values of public media, non-commercial, into new media and platforms? And that will at some point, I believe, include AI. I think a lot of what I think about are games these days and sort of extended reality tech, but I think AI as a platform is coming. And then how do we serve this sort of audience that we have? And this is the kind of classic conundrum, but at the same time trying to cultivate for the next generation of PBS consumers and NPR. Again, I think games is key to that, because I think the game is human. And so this isn't a talk about games, but that's a lot of what we focus on. So why now? Like, why do we have this focus right now? And essentially, tech consumers have evolved. I think y'all are seeing that. I've talked a little bit about games. Local community is no longer local geographically. I think the first time I actually was hit with that concept was Red Sox Nation, and this idea that you could be a Red Sox fan anywhere in the country or in the world. This was just prior to them winning the World Series, mind you. Then this I guess the third point is that this sort of what I call scuba is no longer good enough. Scuba is self-contained, underfunded broadcast apparatus, which is how I think of public media sometimes. And that the skill sets that we need to embrace what's coming, the media that is emerging right now, you have to collaborate, you have to work with other shops to do that. The days of being able to contain the entirety of your engineering and distribution operation, the economics just aren't there anymore. And so especially when you start getting into games, the ability to scale really requires collaboration. Why bother? We need to be able to provide more service across more platforms than ever before, and we have diverse and underserved voices that are in need of allyship. in the emerging media spaces. One of the games that we're working on is actually one that is being co-produced with our friends in Wisconsin, and it's set on the Menominee Indian Reservation. Native voices in video gaming, they're extremely underrepresented, so that's something we're trying to fix in this kind of new space. And then accessibility advocates need a partner too. There are FCC, kind of governs certain aspects of accessibility, captioning, things like that in the broadcast space, but in the gaming space, it's all done by volunteer efforts, and some studios are better than others. So that's another point I like to make here. And we're wrapping up the bit about us. So the thought is generally that if innovation can future-proof public media and civil society is better when there is media created in the public interest across relevant platforms, then we have a responsibility to innovate by translating our values from public media into emerging media. So that gives you about as good a sense of who we are in Nebraska Public Media Labs as you're likely to get anywhere else. So let's get on to this presentation. And I like to start by just saying what this presentation is. And it is an overview of the AI landscape in early 2025. For those watching this on the recording later, we're going to go over the overview of sort of AI capabilities and limitations, potential and causes for concerns, and then the sort of a preview of AI uses. I say public media here, but it's applicable to any type of media, commercial or non-commercial. What this presentation is not a technical deep dive. I learned early on when I'm talking to engineers, don't try to get technical because they know this stuff better than you. So this is going to be more philosophical, as I think the flyer leading you here said. We're not going to do a tutorial into prompt engineering, though I'm happy to answer some questions like that in the Q&A. And this is also not a Valentine to artificial intelligence. As Marty said in the beginning, tech can be used for good or it can be used for ill. I very much believe that. It's part of my sort of philosophy of technology. And so I'm not here to sell you on AI. I'm here to kind of demystify it and kind of have more of a brass tacks conversation on where we're going. So that's what this presentation is not. So let's talk hype. We have been in hype cycles with AI before. Typically, these have to do with sort of major public pushes forward, things like Deep Blue winning at chess, Google self-driving cars, Alexa debuting. The last real big hype cycle prior to 2023 was really, I think, kind of around 2012 and 2013 when the singularity and Kurzweil's pushing of the singularity was the cover story in Time. But even in the latter half of the teens, we had, AI winning more games like Go that it was never supposed to be winning. 2017 with China's declaration of AI intent was sort of a shot across the bow that AI was going to be of nationalistic concern. It wasn't just going to be tech for everybody. And then, of course, we really started to see these sort of general, purpose transformers. I think I'm getting the P and GPT wrong, but they kick in the late teens. And that's really what leads us into this sort of era of generative imagery, which kind of kicks off July 12th, 2022, and then really is supercharged with ChatGPT hitting the scene in the last weekend of November of 2022. So I think the big thing about the hype that I've noticed over the years is that AI is really about, I guess, creating a more perfect human. I think that's kind of the fear, and also you'll see in a second the opportunity. On the fear side, there's a few categories where this plays out. Work, it's funny how AI was not really so problematic until it started threatening white collar jobs. We've been talking for years, especially in like the futurist community, about self-driving trucks and experiments that have been done along those lines, self-driving farm equipment, combines and whatnot. And everyone talked about, well, truckers are going to have to be retrained and stuff. But and that's that seemed like society was fine with that until we got to a point where it was writers who were being threatened and translators and artists. But that's where we're at. The fear that AI will be a replacement in sort of the aspect of life revolving around love, and that there are people who have had romantic attachments to AI bots, and to disastrous effect. I guess disastrous is an understatement. There is one lawsuit that's playing out because a young man, I think he might have been around the age of 14, basically fell in love with a chatbot, which eventually, I don't want to say it convinced him, but he had suicidal tendencies, and the chatbot encouraged him to lean into that. And he ended his life to be with the chatbot forever, and then an afterlife, so to speak. That's the level of attachment people are developing with these type of entities. So there's a lot of responsibility that comes with this tech. The fear of free will being replaced. If you've read any books by Yuval Noah Harari, I especially recommend Nexus, which kind of talks a little bit about how AI could be a huge accelerant to an autocratic regime. I'm not trying to comment on today, but it's worth a read if you haven't checked out that book called Nexus. And then the sort of fear that, AI will eventually just kill off all of humanity, be it Terminator, Cylons, HAL, what have you. But there's also a hope aspect of this as well, what I call salvation through scalability. This idea that AI is going to make us more efficient, it's more fast or accurate. It's going to create exponential wealth. That's one of the early arguments that Sam Altman at OpenAI was saying before ChatGPT was really even a household name. There are podcasts where he's being interviewed saying, "Oh no, this is going to just make the wealth available to humanity that much greater." I hope that AI will eventually lead to immortality, that it will end disease, it will prolong life, find new cures. I think that is baked into the hype around hope, and that it'll free us from loneliness. Seeing a question here, familiar with NYC show on the media. They have reported, enshittification. Yes, that is. I'm blanking on his name. He's a writer from Canada originally. The enshittification of online platforms. Do you anticipate that happening with generative AI platforms? We'll get into a little bit of that. It's a little bit garbage in, garbage out, like any data system. Will it be enshittified? I think that Cory Doctorow is the person, by the way, who coined enshittification. I think that AI will be, to use the word again, an accelerant for enshittification. It is easier to create shitty content with AI. We in the AI world call that AI slop, and you may have run across that term. Google it if you haven't. But that is really the sort of preponderance of AI that you're seeing out there that just kind of blitzes through all of the social channels. And you say, should we be worried about data poisoning, featuring abandonment or feature abandonment? Calling out Alexa here. Yes. The short answer is I think you should be worried about all of those components. And we probably will touch on the periphery of those. But ask me that question more towards the end if I don't get into the specifics enough for you. So we can come back to that one. So the one thing I like to always tell people is remember that hype isn't fabrication, it's caricature. There is something real beneath the surface, even if the hopes and fears are both overblown. So why now? In terms of like AI having its iPhone moment, we've got a convergence of tech trends, edge computing, 5G, cloud services, probably more than anything, cloud services. This data is old data, but there was a projection, and I couldn't find an updated version of it, so I left it in, that this year we'd be creating 463 exabytes a day. I've actually seen that go up as high as some estimates of 494 exabytes a day, with I think 181 zettabytes by the end of the year. Um, but then on the technical side, we've got breakthroughs in compute power, obviously the rise of NVIDIA, like I'm sure you all are familiar with that, and then the breakthroughs in natural language understanding and generation. From the social side, we've been conditioned to sort of accept AI for most of the last decade. I mean, the introduction of Alexa, which was just mentioned, and by John, and Siri, and we've been trained to accept AI for most of the teens, and then the last 2 years we've really had immersion into a world of AI with the sort of technological advances that have come along. And I think the other component that's social is this user experience component that we all can be programmers now. We all can be engineers of a type. So again, introducing that sort of natural language component makes it just more accessible to more people. So a lot of the hopes and fears stem, I think, more from this notion of AGI, artificial general intelligence, or artificial super intelligence. Artificial general intelligence is the idea that any one AI instance is as smart as a human. And there are people who are debating this week that the O3 reasoning model from ChatGPT actually crosses that border. Um, the writer and I think he's a Penn State professor, Wharton. No, he's at Wharton. At Penn State. Ethan Malik has been talking about the sort of ragged AGI, that it's not going to be a clear line that we cross, but it's going to kind of be all over the place, and we'll only kind of know it after the fact. But that's artificial general intelligence. Artificial super intelligence is the idea that you'll have an instance of AI that is as smart as all humans combined. That people think is still maybe a decade away, but everyone believes it will happen. I think a lot of people believe it'll happen before 2050. In the world that we are living in now, in this talk that we are talking about today, we're talking about narrow AI, very specific focused. But again, you'll start to see more and more conversations about AGI over the course of this year, because the tech is getting good enough that people are becoming convinced we're there. And then specifically today, we're talking about generative AI and agentic AI, which is kind of the next wave coming out. So as I was doing this, I said before we got started, I went back to my 23 deck thinking I'd just steal a few things from it. And it turned out that I just thought, oh, let me build from that. Actually, it was a much better platform than what I was going to build off of. So I thought I left just a couple of slides in. Most everything else is updated, but I was pretty fascinated by the comparison of 2023 to now, because 2 years is essentially two generations in the life of, and I say generations, I'm thinking human generations. 2 years in the AI world is like 40 in the human world. And so I thought it would be interesting just to kind of compare these two. So you've had a chance to look at this. I won't dive deep into it. But the 2025 version, Alien Brains, reasoning is now the future of AI. It didn't understand our context before, but AI is having increasing awareness of human context. It's not quite to the spatial realm yet, but one of the tricks that people are playing around with ChatGPT, the O3 reasoning model, is they'll drop in images where the geo metadata is stripped out, geographic metadata, and ask it to find out where, say where this picture was taken. And it can not only do that in terms of latitude and longitude, but also in terms of altitude. So one example I saw said, well, not only are you on this beach, but you're about 150 feet up, and I'm assuming this model says you're in, this hotel and in one of these two restaurants that were sort of kind of penthouse type restaurants. So it's beginning to develop a sense of 3D awareness, which 2 years ago we were like, well, that's one of the big frontiers. It's going to have such a hard time getting around that, and it's now starting to be able to at least parrot that back to us. Whether AI truly understands that yet, I think, is more the realm of robotics. But at least the algorithms behind all of it are beginning to factor that in. In terms of ambiguity, specificity was required 2 years ago. Now it's really, all about the vibes. And if you haven't heard the term vibe coding, you could be forgiven for that. It was only coined in February, but it's been all the rage, especially when I was at South by Southwest last month. Vibes that were just keeps coming up all over the place. So what it essentially means is you don't really have to be specific. You just have to give these tools a sense of the vibe you want, and it will begin to translate for you into code, into imagery, into something specific. In terms of bias, in 2023, we were very concerned about the kind of tech bro biases coming in there, that if it's trained on the internet is largely, white men of a certain socioeconomic status. And now I think the concerns about bias have to do more with AI splitting along lines of the culture wars. And, a couple of weeks ago, Meta drops a new open sourced model in their Llama line. I think this was Llama 4. And one of the things they really touted about Llama 4 was that it was not woke, that it was a free speech champion, much along the lines that Musk has kind of pushed with his Grok chatbot. And yeah, Zuckerberg's copying Musk at pretty much every turn these days, but especially when it comes to the development of AI and this idea that you're going to have different AI tools that have different that just fall on different sides of the culture war. I was myself, speaking personally, I was pretty prepared for there to be AI nationalism, that China was going to have an AI that followed Chinese values, that was blockaded in the way that the Chinese internet is blockaded. You're seeing models that have developed out of France. You're seeing models that have developed out of the Emirates, the Falcon models. That AI was ultimately going to be subdivided from the earliest days by nationality. I wasn't so much looking to it to be subdivided within nations by culture. And then this idea of data dependency. Before in 2023, we were talking about the fear of peak data. Now I think we're actually more thinking about the inspiration of peak data, because while the idea that peak data is here hasn't gone away, it is causing people to look at different ways of innovating and different ways of getting around the problems that exist when we have loaded up all of the usable data that is possible to mine into these machines already, and they would like more. So you got to figure out a different way to kind of process it. Second set of slides. Again, in 23, you've got the sort of problems with explainability and transparency. You've got problems with sort of alignment with human values. That was a big concern 2 years ago. How are we going to align these new alien brains with our views of the world? Anthropic, who puts out the chatbot Claude, was one of the first to really lead in this space of human alignment. And this human alignment also gets toward nationalism as well, because obviously different nations have different values. The idea behind privacy and surveillance capitalism was a concern. And then in terms of the digital divide, it was about connectivity and infrastructure. And then with specificity in 2023, one of the big things we were telling everybody was, this is a tool. This is not a toolbox. Like, there's one or two things each of these things can do, and that's it. And as you'll see, actually, it's changed. We still have the explainability and transparency issues. The people who are making these models and tools don't know why they're doing what they're doing. They just know they seem to work, and they tune them, and they're getting better at tuning them, and they kind of understand how the tuning works. But there is still a black box component. I talked about, okay, if you're aligning with human values, which human values? I won't go deeper there. Surveillance capitalism will still be an issue. How is this data being used? You are probably savvy enough to know free is never free. I'm enthused that a lot of these models are going with subscription service approaches to their business models, not advertising. I think it's inevitable that ads will creep into this. I think Google is likely, depending on what happens with its monopolistic breakup, Google could be the one who kind of breaks through on that. So surveillance capitalism is still a concern, as is connectivity and infrastructure. The digital divide is not specific to AI, as you all well know. But with specificity, one of the things that's been surprising is that these tools have really evolved to become toolboxes. You've got different models now under the surface with, for example, ChatGPT, but those models can access research, which is internet search. They can access collaborative work projects. They can create images. They can do image analysis. And we'll get into a little bit of that discussion when we touch on agentic AI. So, now we're dealing with actual toolboxes, not just like things that can do one and kind of one trick ponies, if you will. I'll breeze real quickly through policy and I'll do a quick time check. I'm halfway through. One of the things we really focused on early on in Nebraska was not trying to bang out a bunch of products or do a bunch of projects in AI, but it was about thinking, how do we get our people ready for the future that seemed inevitable to us? So a lot of that had to do with developing policy around AI. So our early approaches to AI were very much telling our staff, hey, look, we're telling you there's nothing to be ashamed of here. You may hear otherwise in other corners, but we're here to tell you that this is the future. You need to be experimenting. We encourage you to experiment. Do you want a paid account? We'll pay for that for you. And you just need to come and tell us what you want to use it for, and let's have that conversation. So we encouraged a very casual experimentation early on, because we saw the promise of AI use. We think that there will be cost savings. There will be better ROIs in terms of investment on production or on distribution workflows. So we think there's going to be operational efficiencies. I think AI can reduce human error. It can accelerate, or I probably should have, for this updated deck, changed that to automate tedious tasks. And I think in terms of optimizing resource allocation, we've already seen algorithms in AI do that, in the broadcast space. It's interesting, just as an aside, I still have conversations with a lot of my colleagues about digital and the idea that, oh, well, we've got our broadcast side and our digital side. And one of the things I always come back around to is like, broadcast has been digital for for a long time, even before we were like transmitting with ATSC 10. A lot of the workflow behind the scenes was digital, and so I think that plays into this idea of optimizing for resource allocation. I think we in broadcast were tackling that a long time ago. In terms of the promise for enhanced creativity, I'll again get into a little bit more of this, but the idea that you can use it for ideation and brainstorming or concept review. So these are all the sort of the promises that we recognized. In terms of how we define the primary objectives for AI use, we are thinking about it as a ways to enhance our service, but at the same time maintain high ethical standards. That is core to our policy, and then also protect audience trust within the public TV world and public radio to the same extent. Trust is sort of the biggest thing we have going for us, and we are always talking in that space about, okay, what are we thinking about doing? How are we experimenting, and how does it impact the potential for audience trust? John just put a question in this in Nebraska Public Me to use stock Chat GPT or private Azure OpenAI source. Right now, we are using people who use the free service or Chat GPT Plus. I've turned off, at least in mind, and I've encouraged others to do so too, the ability to retrain the model. So I'm not sending as much data back up the funnel. I want to play around with the pro account, but I've got to find some white space that justifies me spending a month and $200 on that particular product. But I'm intrigued mostly because I want to play more with Sora there. But we also have people who are using Claude. That is the favorite of a handful of folks. And I think there are a few folks who are using some of the Google tools for free. And of course, when it comes to search, as we'll talk about later, pretty much everybody is getting access to AI through Google search now. So these are the guiding principles that we have. They're written into our policy. And the most important one is people first, people last. When we stood in front of our all staff meeting in March of 2023, April 2023, we said, look, we think this is the future, but we're here to tell you we're not embracing this to eliminate jobs. We are doing this because we think that we can actually make more public media more efficiently if we use these tools. And so we really want to help increase your sort of creative output, uh, not come up with ways to replace any of you. That was part of our messaging early on. But you can see some of the transparency and accountability is another super important one. These are roughly organized in order of importance to us, though I don't think any one of them is not important. So it gives you a sense of the guiding principles, but people first, people last is sort of the one that we always talk about when we do these presentations. So essentially, we took the principles and we boiled them down into sort of we will statements, and you can see we will augment, not replace people. We will prioritize human oversight. I split people first and last for this slide. We will inform the audience when generative AI is used, or any AI at this point. We will stay true to our editorial principles. They are still the foundation. And again, as an aside on that, people talk to me a little bit about experimenting with new tech, and they ask about how we do it and how we approach it. And it was really AI that kind of codified it for me, or not codified it. Kind of brought it into focus for me, that it really doesn't matter whether you're talking about extended reality tech, whether you're talking about AI or you're talking about game engines. If you approach experimentation through the sort of lens of your values, of your organizational values, then you're usually going to be in a good place. I think it's one of the reasons why experimenting with new tech isn't scary for us, because we're not just kind of bursting into new spaces uh, without thinking first about, okay, what are the values that cause us to do what we do every day? So, and that comes through in staying true to our editorial principles. We will actively work to mitigate bias in GAI tools when we can. We will stay current with this as it evolves, and I probably should change GAI to just AI, because again, it doesn't take into account agentic AI, which has evolved over the last few months. We will collaborate and learn, to learn and to teach, which means sharing with folks, and then we will prioritize opportunities for everybody on our staff who wants to play. Let's see here. Tom says audience trust. There's a distrust of public media in certain circles, fueled by misinformation and disinformation, I would add, that is spread by viral podcasts. Can AI tools help build trust by debunking these efforts? My first thought is, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and so much has to do with human perception and who people choose to trust or don't. Is AI going to help convince people who don't already trust us to start trusting us? I doubt that. I think, especially in the moment we're in, I mean, people's views are pretty baked in at this stage in the game, and I hope we see evolution, but that evolution happens over time. Um, I think we can, on public media's side, encourage people to trust us by saying when we use AI and when we don't. But I'm not sure AI, if anything, AI might end up having a negative effect. And specifically, I'm thinking about a study that the Poynter Institute published, I think last week, which was a survey of news consumers, so not news creators, but news consumers, on how they felt about AI. And for the most part, they weren't crazy about news organizations using AI. They didn't want to get their AI through bots. They wanted to know when organizations were using AI, and they wanted that clearly stated. So I guess, to answer your question, I sort of feel like an overuse of AI tools would undermine us with the people who still are open to trusting us, or even more importantly, the people who do trust us, who are amongst that kind of majority of Americans on both sides of the aisle who trust us. But you're not wrong. There is definitely distrust that is being those seeds are being sown in various circles these days. So going back to the presentation, so our guardrails for experimentation are really around augmenting creation, reinforcing transparency, and evaluating bias. For augmenting creation, that this is again human oversight, using it for ideating, drafting, and refining. I am going to tell you why I think actually now it could be used as a research tool in a bit. So put an asterisk by that one. In terms of transparency, one of the early distinctions we made was between editorial and corporate content. So using a chat bot to help draft a press release was not considered out of bounds. Using it to draft, copy, that was something that had to be very carefully reviewed. And so we made a distinction between editorial and corporate content. And then to inform production teams, if you're using AI, it's not a sin to use AI, but just tell everyone you're doing it. For the most part, it might give other people inspiration to use it in a way they hadn't previously thought of. And then we just talked about informing audiences. As terms of evaluating bias, we treat all AI, even the stuff that's coming out of these new research tools, which I think are actually pretty good. We treat that as unvetted source material, so it has to be fact checked and rigorously. And then one of my mantras is know your tools. Understand what you're using, what its biases are, what it's good for, and what it's not. And that's gotten a lot harder in the last year because even just someone like OpenAI is releasing multiple models that can be used in multiple ways, and people who have been tracking this since November of 2022 are finding themselves perplexed by like news that, for example, last week, OpenAI released ChatGPT 4.1. They released ChatGPT or the Model O3, and they released the Model O4 Mini. And everyone was immediately like, okay, what am I supposed to use? What's good for what? The companies are not helping not helping with clear product marketing for us. So know your tools. Freeze never free, I talked about that. Using the cloud. These guardrails are actually all developed out of collaboration with our IT department. So if this all looks like security best practices, there's a reason for that. And I'm also going to assume most of you all know these, so we're going to move ahead. One thing to note, this is still only the beginning. And I say that even for Nebraska Public Media. We've been in this now 2 years. We are going to be focusing this year much more concretely on staff training and getting staff onboarded to AI. We've kind of left the sandbox play phase, and now it's going to be kind of a department by department assessment of what problems do you have that we think AI could solve for you, and how do we begin to work AI into your daily work lives. Along the way, we will have staff feedback through an advisory council that I'm putting together, folks who come from different parts of the organization. And then I mentioned we have a policy. You saw, sort of slides articulating that. I update that policy about every 6 months, and I'm about to do it again for agentic AI. So this will be our third version of the policy coming up. But we're committed to doing semi-annual reviews of those. Let's see. So let's do a quick tour of the tools. And the categories of narrow AI that I want to kind of go through today, these are distinctions that we have started making internally or were making internally 2 years ago. The first is AI infused products. And you all know these because, again, there have been products through the broadcast space that have had, AI or have been marketed as having AI or machine learning baked into them from, the beginning. Well, not the beginning of broadcast, but, from the beginning of sort of the digital age, people have talked about, oh, we've got machine learning under the hood that's making this all more efficient, and algorithms and whatnot. That sort of auto magic approach. We kept those out of our policy. We were like, that's coming from the manufacturers. If you are buying this through a vendor, like we're not weighing in on your capital expenditures. That's out of bounds for this. What we really care about from a policy standpoint are these generative AI tools, which are tools that are designed for active engagement with the user, and that also promote an iterative process, sort of vibe coding or vibe editing. And then more recently, and what the policy doesn't cover yet, is agentic AI, which is going from sort of the generating to automating. And these are models that have agency and independence, and we'll touch on that here in a bit. So in terms of generative AI, we won't spend a lot of time here. Chatbots, I'll take questions on any of these, but I think you all know ChatGPT from OpenAI. It is the Xerox, the Kleenex, the household term for AI chatbots. But Anthropic has Claude, Google has Gemini, X, which has now been merged through some shenanigans with XAI, has Grok. And then there are open source bots as well, like Llama, or the Chinese version that freaked everybody out when it just popped open on a Friday afternoon from DeepSeek, which ended up being a lot more smoke and mirrors than people gave it credit for on that first weekend, and that the markets gave it credit for. So again, I'll talk more about chatbots later, but what I want to do with the next couple slides is just give you some companies or products to check out if you haven't in these different categories. So for generative imagery, if you haven't played in this space, it really was the first space where generative AI was catching on, because the chatbots weren't released until later in 22. Midjourney was the first, again, July 12th, 2022. And Midjourney is still going strong. And you have seen Midjourney images. If you have seen, pictures of any 70-year-old that is completely ripped, big muscles, really cut, that's probably coming out of Midjourney. Midjourney has a very specific kind of hyper realistic style, looks real, but then also feels fake. And so Midjourney's kind of become the clip art of the early 2020s. But if you know how to use it, and it is much more complicated to use than a lot of these tools, lots of very specific instructions that you have to learn and master to really get the most out of it. But if you learn how to use it, you can actually be a really successful artist and not have people know that what you generated came out of AI. There's also ChatGPT 4.0. So if you are a ChatGPT subscriber, maybe you had access to DALL-E 3 for a while. You really probably want to make the shift over to using 4.0, which is their kind of base model now for doing images. They just added that feature a week or two ago, and it is I have had much more success with that than I had with DALL-E. Again, DALL-E had a very specific style, and I got tired of that style pretty quick. I use generative imagery for my newsletter, for cover photos, things like that. So I played around with a lot of these, and I just started using GPT 4.0 last week, and I've been much happier with it. I really only use DALL-E when I had to, as last resort. Google Imagen or Imagine, I'm never quite sure how they pronounce it. They're up to Model 3 on that one. It is also really good. I don't like it because it only generates square images, and then I've got to figure out how to crop it and everything, and it's just more work than I want. But I think if you're creating images for social media context, Google's tool is one of the best out there. And then Adobe Firefly, the biggest thing about a Firefly is that it is not trained on copyrighted images. So it is not subject to lawsuits. Adobe will indemnify you and your use of Firefly, which is huge, especially if you're in the creative industries. So I've used Firefly quite a bit. I don't find it works as well with kind of vibe generating, if you will. I think, not surprising from Adobe, you really kind of need to be an artist. You need to be able to speak in the lexicon of an artist to get the most out of Firefly. Sometimes I love the images that I get, but sometimes I'm also really frustrated because I feel like I just don't have the art training to get as much out of the tool as I think I could otherwise. So that's generative imagery. In terms of generative audio, you have a ton at this point. Audio is actually not so hard to do, as it turns out. You have a ton of text to voice and voice to voice tools out there. I think the one that kind of everyone talks about is 11 Labs. There are lots. If you Google generative audio, you'll get plenty of suggestions and lists and whatnot. But 11 Labs is the one that we've had the most success with. It's the one that you probably have heard of because it was used to deep fake Biden's voice in at New Hampshire fake phone call during election season last year. And that was a older version of 11 Labs. It's gotten much better since then. We've done some voiceover experiments with 11 Labs where we have had both the narrator and a 11 Labs version of the narrator. Like we took his voice and fed it into 11 Labs and created the same copy over the same video. And it was interesting. People could tell what was AI and what wasn't, but a lot of people like the AI version better. So what do you do when people know it's AI, but they prefer AI? We're still kind of trying to figure that bit out. In terms of music, this is an area that is basically we're just waiting on the lawsuits. This is Napster all over again. And so if you are playing around with tools, I recommend trying Suno. I think it's the best right now. Udio was kind of the second on the scene and was pretty good, though it's fallen off, I think, in terms of it being competitive. And then Refusion is another one I've heard quite a bit about. But I used to, when I do these when I would do these talks live, I would do live demos of Suno because crowds just really love it when you like let them prompt it and then it creates a song on the fly. So there's still a little bit of wow factor in that one. So that covers generative audio. Generative video, I swore that 2025 would be the year of generative video, and it just is kind of piffled. I think the tech is good. I think maybe people have just gotten kind of burnt out. And again, it's getting harder and harder to wow people. I think that skill is coming, or that the wow factor is coming out of agentic AI at this point. But if you wanted to play around with video, Runway Gen 4 is one of the big ones to try. Google's VO2, by a lot of accounts, is the best video generator out there right now. Sora, which everyone thought was going to take the cake because OpenAI kind of they released sample footage February of 2024. When Sora finally came out, it was kind of problematic, and it has not rebuilt back up its trust. Google's really got that at this point. And then Adobe Premiere is beginning to work this in too with tools like Generative Extend, which will take a clip that's too short and pad it out on either end by just looking at all the video between your in point and your out point and creating the padding. So Adobe's getting into this space as well. So that kind of covers the main, what I would call synthetic media tools. So let's talk a little bit about agentic AI. Time check. Okay. So agentic AI is pretty new. We started talking a little bit about this last fall when OpenAI started allowing people to create their own GPTs, which are essentially apps in the sort of in the AI space. But what agentic AI does, or what an AI agent does, is it has the freedom to autonomously handle tasks. And so the question, as sort of someone working in a media organization, you have to ask yourself is, where do you need more people that you can't afford more people? Is that in audience research? Is that in sales leads? There was a joke about that in the chat before. And where you have more people, or where you need more people, you might be able to create effect by beginning to deploy sort of agentic AI in that space. But the key is that you don't automate away your staff's identity. And maybe this is more of a public media thing than a commercial media thing. But one of the elements of all of this tech that I've been thinking about is how much of what we do in public media is driven by our identity and is tied to, and how our identities are tied to what we do. I would say non-commercial and commercial, that is true when it comes to the engineering field. I think I would go out on a limb and say y'all identify as engineers as much as that's your job title. And so there are lots of ways AI is going to be beneficial to making your jobs easier, smoother. But what management really has to be careful about is that they don't automate away that bit of the job that is responsible for creating your own sense of identity. So that's something that happens in a conversation basis, person to person, and that's something we're starting to work on this year in Nebraska. I see a question quick from Tom. You mentioned gaming earlier in your speech before you. Can you show us some examples? Maybe, yes. If we have time, we can go a little long, perhaps. Or I'll give you URLs if nothing else. In fact, hold on one second. I can type quickly and accurately. Try that. Oh, John left. All right. Well, everyone. Sorry, I shouldn't have tried to do this live. There. Anyone who wants to bank that for later, that's our latest game, Civic Scribble. And I apologize that oh, I see what happened. Got it. Okay. Sorry, Tom. There you go. There's a link. Thought I was replying to John, but I was replying to Tom. My bad. Okay, on with the show. Agentic AI and the web. This is probably one of the other areas I'm thinking the most about these days. And I will say, just in terms of agentic AI, there's a lot more that needs to be understood and written about this. This is really kind of the frontier of AI right now in terms of AI that is being used by consumers at home. But one of the things I'm thinking about is how agentic AI is going to impact the web and how we distribute and market content on the web. Some things you need to know. You probably know about SEO, search engine optimization, but there's also answer engine optimization, AEO, which optimizes content. If you've gone in and you've done a Google search and you've seen the questions that it has, you can hit the drop downs. There is now a set of skills that have developed around optimizing content for those little drop downs. There's also a generative engine optimization, which is about structuring and formatting your content so AI platforms can reference it. Because we're getting more and more this concept of a zero-click search. You've probably done this. You've gone into Google, you've asked it a question, Google has answered your question. Maybe it's used its AI tools to do that. Maybe it's provided the little drop-down answer engine answers. But you don't then go on and click to a source to find that. Maybe sometimes you do. Maybe you dive a little deeper. But oftentimes, if you're in a hurry, maybe you don't. And that's a zero-click search. That's been the goal of Google for more than a decade. They want to answer the questions that you have before you even have them. And I'm not exaggerating. I've actually heard people say that, from the stage at South by Southwest. And this is, again, about 10 years ago. So how we use the web is changing weekly at this point. And the other thing to be aware of is how we create for the web is also changing. Maybe this is less of a concern in sort of the engineering space, unless you're writing to your fellow engineers and contributing to trade publications. But the art of writing has always been for appealing and resonating with humans. Increasingly, you are going to be writing, if you are a writer, for agents who will go and harvest the information, bring it back in a digested way for the humans. That is a change that is coming. We do not know how that is going to play out yet. So that's the frontier. Okay, using these tools. How do we use these tools in Nebraska? AI and content ideation. You can use it to see insights in big data sets. That's probably one of the earliest uses, and it's still a really solid one. It's great for brainstorming. We encourage our creators to bounce ideas off AI all the time. You can now talk to ChatGPT. Claude is going to have a voice feature in the not too distant future. I think Google's got that. You can talk to them and make your ideation and brainstorming a conversation. And it's helpful in editing, especially when it comes to like text and language refinement, but it's also becoming more useful in terms of editing images or audio or video. Again, I talked a little bit about or mentioned vibe editing in the earlier in the deck. In terms of linear content production, using it for research now, I put an asterisk earlier about don't use it for research. Both Google and OpenAI, ChatGPT, and I think Perplexity all have tools that are called deep research. And then Anthropic has rolled out one through Claude that is just a research tool. 2 years ago, I said to anybody, do not use it for research. It hallucinates, it makes stuff up. Hallucinations are still a problem and will probably always be a byproduct of this type of AI. Newsflash, this is not the only way we can generate AI through large language models or multimodal models. There are actually other ways of getting to the creation of AI products that do not require these approaches. And those are being discussed and haven't been productized yet, but what we think of as AI today may not be what we talk about as AI in 2 years. But for now, you have to worry about hallucinations. That said, most of the major models have access to the web. They will go out and through the deep research tools, create a 20, 30-page report on a topic for you with citations that you can click through and read through yourself. If you have not tried deep research on some of these tools, I really encourage you to do so, just to see what it's capable of. And that is an example of agentic AI, where you are saying, I want to know more about, for example, agentic AI. Put that in. The agent goes out and researches all of these sources and brings you back synthesized information. Beyond that, you can still use these tools for summaries of sources and transcripts. You can use them for converting speech to text in multiple languages. And also we talked about doing voice synthesis. You can use them for writing. We have done first drafts of pitches, for games. They're, I think, pretty helpful with grant applications, frankly, but also can be useful for MOUs and MOAs. And we've even done some script experimentation with them, especially when it comes to like pledge drives and that type of corporate content. From an education standpoint, creating lesson plans, quizzes, I think AI is going to revolutionize education. I think it can put a lot of power in the hands of teachers, but it's also going to be a factor for students as well. I will answer that question, Tom, in just a second. And then marketing, again, content descriptions, press releases, social media, feeding, boiling down a description of a program from its caption files. I've seen that done. That's pretty interesting. Then boiling it down further so that it fits in the very, very tiny allotment of space that on-screen program guides allow you for your shows. OpenAI AI tools can automate all of that. Tom asks, are there tools that can spot AI in images, video, and text? There are. Text, I think, is the hardest. Any tool that's saying like, oh, we can validate this for AI appropriateness or AI usage, that's not true. It might get it right half the time. There have been real problems with students being accused of cheating when they didn't cheat. And then there have been lots and lots of students who have used AI in school and didn't get caught for it at all. I think what's interesting is less can it spot AI in imagery or in video, because there are actually there's some standards that are being deployed. Adobe is one of the big proponents of this, where they will create metadata that watermarks it essentially as an AI generated piece of content, piece of synthetic media. But what's really interesting is you can inject your media now, audio. I've seen experiments with that and imagery with code that can actually really screw up models that have harvested your content against your sort of copyright wishes. So there's a lot of interesting things to be said about that, but we're getting a little short on time. So I think with imagery it is and audio it's a little easier than with the outputs from chatbots. So let's talk a little bit about future. Breeze through it really fast. Where do I think AI is headed? I think we're still on the path to improved reasoning and a much greater knowledge of human context, especially spatial context. I think once you get into that realm, you're talking about robotics, but you're also talking about the metaverse and spatial web, which is definitely out of scope for this conversation. And then I think we're seeing more user-friendly products for automating your life with AI, more and more emphasis on AI agency, doing things for you, creating recipes, creating travel plans, that sort of thing. I think we're going to see more increased collaboration between AI and human creators, but that's going to create new types of tedium too. There will still, even in a world where AI can make things streamlined for you, there will still be shit work, I am sorry to say. It's just that that should work will be tied to AI now. And then the complete disruption of how we use the internet. I talked a little bit about what's going to happen with that. Uh, where could we be headed? This is a little bit more speculative on my part, but the death of distributors. Will agents just go out and get whatever video your agent thinks you need to wrap up your day at the end of your day? We're all used to being able to go on, and select our programs. I think we're going to get more and more for Generation Alpha and beyond into a world where your agent just provides you your content. So far from 3 channels plus PBS. Data sets and libraries will continue to be aligned with divergent values. Again, culture war comes to AI. And then I think I see increased media literacy, but leading to indifference. I was really surprised. I was very worried about the impact AI would have on elections. And I was really heartened that it felt like everyone, in civil society got on board with the idea that media could be faked. And it ended up not being the weapon that a lot of us thought it could be. But I think the flip side of that is that people just become indifferent to AI. And I think there's a danger there as well. So what can we do, as an industry, ensure the responsible use or handling and use of user data, comply with regulations such as they are, communicate AI's role in your content creation, allow for scrutiny from your audiences, address and mitigate bias where you find it, respect copyright. And when we do get official standards watermarking synthetic media, lean into those, be transparent about media that is synthetic, and then ensure human involvement in decisions and in editorial integrity. People first, people last. What can you do personally? Stay on top of this. Thank you again for having me here, because that's part of monitoring AI developments and advancements. But there's so many good newsletters out there that are covering this space now. Keep an eye on those. Experiment, play around with this stuff. There is no shortage to just playing with these tools yourselves. And I mentioned Ethan Malik earlier. He's got a kind of a rule that you really need to spend about 10 hours with one of these tools before you really get it. So, carve that time out for yourself. Don't think you're going to get it in the first 30 minutes of the first hour. But generally speaking, after 10 hours, you've got a pretty good handle, and you kind of got a glimpse of the future. Collaborate with your colleagues in your organizations and other organizations. Develop or be a part of developing ethical guidelines for the companies that you work for and best practices. And then just, help keep your teams on the right side of the digital divide. That's, I think, most important things. You see someone who doesn't want to lean into this, talk to them about why you think maybe they should be doing some experimentation, and help bring people along. This is going to be hugely disruptive. And the best we can do, I think, is really to try to keep as many people from being replaced by AI as possible. I'm Chad Davis. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chad. It's a lot to think about. One of the things I'm wondering is, do you see things reaching a point where legislation is needed to give this technology a conscience?
The idea of conscience is very interesting. In fact, I just fought off the urge to go find this tab that I have open in one of my many browsers. Anthropic just released something that had to do with it's a paper talking about encoding their AI tools with moral values. So I encourage you to Google Anthropic and chatbot and moral values. I'm sure it'll come up, because I literally saw it this morning and it's sitting in an open tab somewhere. So this idea that AI could have a conscience is something that a lot of people are thinking about. But consciousness is a whole other thing, which is not what you asked. I just wanted to briefly make a mention of that. Ultimately, we are still in a space where I think you're going to have. I think regulation depends on who's in charge of the regulating. We were on that path up until January. I think now we are in a space where you are going to have more influence from the companies that are, how do I want to say this diplomatically, that would be impacted by the legislation. I think there's going to be a push from them to self-regulate. That is certainly what I think Musk would like to see. I think Zuckerberg would also like to see that. Sam Altman talks a good game. I can't quite get a beat on that guy. Um, I think he understands the dangers and is open to encouraging governmental regulation, which is sort of a weird way of self-regulating. It's like, please regulate me. But you're also kind of you're controlling the spin when you do that. I think Dario Amodei, who runs Anthropic, is probably the most aligned with having some type of outside regulation dictate what happens. But you quickly, when you talk about regulation, get into the idea of AI nationalism. And there is a real fear about China. Uh, I'm not sure if it's justified or not at this point. America has and continues to have, I think, the advantage when it comes to the algorithms. China has just so much more data than we have access to because they have a billion people and we have 350 odd million, 360 million. And they don't have a problem subjecting their people to data collection in a way that we still allow you to have some privacy with your data. It's just a different society. So they will eventually catch up to us, even though we have the better algorithms, because that's not a deep moat. But they have so much more data to train their models on. So more of a complicated answer than I think you were necessarily asking for, but they're all factors there. Other questions?
Other questions? Dave.
David. You're muted, Dave.
Well, I think you're muted, David.
I'm
Please come.
muted. No, I'm not. Sorry. How does one access the tools that you're talking about? And of course, nothing's free. So how does the cost function work?
There, I want to answer the free question. So I'm a firm believer that free is never free. There are zero costs. Let me change that. There are $0 instances of all of these tools. What they get, because it's still early days with this tech, what they get is you are helping them train the model. So your data is being used in terms of the training. You're not being sold the way you are on social media as a product, but your data is being used to help improve the product. When you pay for these tools, so for example, ChatGPT Plus costs $20 a month. You have the ability to then say, I don't want my data to train the models. Or you can determine what ChatGPT remembers about your conversations or doesn't remember about your conversations, remembers about your web search or doesn't. You can now set Microsoft's Edge browser to use ChatGPT as the default search engine instead of Google or DuckDuckGo or any of the others, or even Bing. So when you spend money, you get more privacy, is what essentially comes down to. You can get a pro version of ChatGPT that has souped up models, it does video and things like that. That's going to cost you $200 a month. But I advocate, if you really want to kind of get into with some of these, $20 a month is sort of the going rate. Google's settled in around that. That's what Anthropic settled in around. That's what ChatGPT is at. What I will say about that $20 rate is that $20 rate's been the rate now for almost 2 years. When I first started paying that $20, I got what is now a mediocre chatbot. It was wowie at the time, but it's mediocre by today's standards. I'm still paying $20, but now I get the deep research tool. I get the voice features. I get 5 different models I can choose from that can do coding, that can do reasoning, that can do creative writing. I get a collaborative tool that allows me to work in a sort of a team-like setting, and I get an image generator, all for $20. So the value of what I get for that $20 keeps going up. Now that won't happen forever, but that's the space that we're in right now. Midjourney will cost you $20 to $30 a month. But I mean, it's trite to recommend people try out ChatGPT, but I think honestly, even if you just do it for a month, $20, you'll be able to play around with image generation. You'll be able to play around with research, and you'll get all of the sort of, uh, frontier edge chatbot reasoning tools. So that's what I kind of push people toward. But if you're a Google user, like those tools are just as good. Honestly, AI went from specialty product to commoditized product so fast, and they really are kind of commodities. So if you're somebody who spends your days using Google Sheets and Google and Gmail and all that stuff, use Google's tools. Like that'll be just fine for you.
Thank you.
What I won't necessarily recommend is Copilot. Copilot is like ChatGPT, but sort of weirdly hybridized with Microsoft's own AI tools, which aren't great because we haven't really heard about them. But they put those two things together and they call it Copilot. And Copilot is good enough. If the only thing your company will let you use is Microsoft products, sure, use Copilot. But I don't recommend Copilot. If I'd recommend using ChatGPT instead. Same cost, essentially.
Thank you, Chad. Keep us informed as things change. We'd love to have you back.
Will do.
To say 1 year, I used to say that video years were like dog years, but this is
Yeah.
even going even faster.
Yeah,
So,
in social media, when we did that, it was like every year was 5 years in social media, and I really do believe every year is about 20 years in AI. So yeah, let's do it again in a year. So
absolutely. Yeah, thank you
Cool.
so much.
Thank you,
And
Chad.
all of you remember that on May 7th, the joint meeting we're having with New York will also be on AI, but more on generative AI tools. And so it'll be more the technical side of how this is all done and used. So I hope you can make that. That will also be on Zoom. And of course, our NAB wrap up in person at WBZ on April 28th. We will have refreshments and all of the our chowder, our famous chowder. Isn't that right, Paul? It's worth attending just for that. So we hope we'll see you, and thank you very much, and good night.